We need to stop standardized testing, and here's why. Standardized tests. We've all taken them and we've all felt the stress they cause us. We have been bribed with pizza parties because if we got good test scores, our schools decide to reward us with a pizza party. But what do those test scores really mean? When the students get good test scores, that means that the schools in that district get more funding from the federal government because the government is who gives the test to the students, basically. Is forcing children to take an annual exam given by the federal government really appropriate? Shouldn't they be given by the state or local government instead, who actually get to see these children and see these schools? When we are children, we learn through play. We play with trucks and Legos and learn how to connect things, which is our way of learning when we're in daycare, let's say. But as soon as you hit public school or private school, you get tests and more tests. You get all these tests so your school can be funded and your teachers can keep their jobs. The standardized tests can be effective, but they really do not need to be an annual event here in the United States because we're teaching children how to take a test through the teach-to-test method rather than just teaching them information that they need to learn. If they're just doing the teach-to-test method, they're not actually retaining the information that they need to learn for their future. A standardized test only applies to one learning style. There's 8 different learning styles. So children are being left out and forced to take a test that they were never prepared for, no matter how much they were taught in school. The teach-to-test method is not the best way for children to learn, and it limits the teacher's freedom in the curriculum. In 2000, President George W. Bush created the No Child Left Behind Act. And this basically linked standardized test scores to the schools directly. If the school overall tested poorly, that means that it would link back to the government and they would get less funding, which sometimes could lead to school closings or teachers' jobs being lost. Heather Newton and Eric Badricher from Credo Points of View discussed the cons of standardized testing, and they found that teachers are forced to teach to test rather than the subject matter. They believe that standardized tests should be replaced with other forms of testing, such as essay writing and oral examinations. If they used written and oral ways to examine a student, this applies to more of the learning styles, and students can put their own unique twist on it, which would also benefit their specific learning style. The teach-to-test method only applies to one of those 8 learning styles I was talking about, and it forces children to pick the right answer out of a bunch of wrong answers, and it doesn't really open the opportunity for freedom and creative thinking. Teachers have no freedom in their classroom, and they're forced to follow this teach-to-test method even if they don't approve it. I myself actually went to be a teacher, and I stopped that degree after 1 year because I didn't like that the teachers had no freedom in their classrooms, and I did not agree with this teach-to-test method at all. The teachers that are currently working in the education system, though, unfortunately do continue to do this because they do fear that they will lose their jobs if they don't follow this strict, tight curriculum that is being forced on them by the federal government, basically. If you went to high school, you remember the stress of SAT testing day and the fear of not getting into your dream college just because of a poor SAT test. I myself remember that exactly because I am not a great test taker, and I was worried that I was not going to be able to go to college because of one test. Your SAT scores are seen as your golden ticket to college, let's say. People see it as life or death. If you don't get a good score, you're not going to go to college. But that's not actually the case. In fact, many schools are not even requiring SAT scores anymore for admission. They're calling it an optional part of your application. You can either submit your scores or you don't have to. There's about 800 colleges to this date that do not require SAT testing scores. This makes it a lot easier for those who aren't great test takers and just fear the whole concept altogether. According to Tracy Durrell, making the SAT optional can ease the path to admission for students. This is because they're less stressed out and they can focus more on their grades and extracurricular activities, which actually makes your college application look a lot better. So if you don't want to take your SATs, you should really focus on being active outside of the classroom and while inside of the classroom. This comic that I found actually represents the SAT a lot. It's a whole bunch of mess on the top and the teacher's not explaining, and the student says, "I don't understand." She says, "That's okay, just memorize it and you'll be fine." That's a perfect example of the teach-to-test method. Students are required to memorize information without really retaining it and understanding the information they're being told. I mentioned easing the stress for students by removing the SAT. I personally think that's very important because in my senior year, I had to take the SAT. I actually ended up taking it twice to get a good score, and I had to focus on a senior project that my high school required. The senior project was a year-long project that included over 80 hours of community service and about 20 other individual projects to make up one large project. So on top of worrying about good scores, I was worrying about the senior project, which could ultimately, if I failed it, could mean I didn't get to graduate. All the stress and pressure that we put on high school students is causing students to cheat, which is greatly increasing in schools all over our country. According to Heather Newton and Eric Bradsher, even children with high intelligence may find themselves placed in remedial courses if they don't perform well on standardized tests. Not only do standardized tests impact their future college choice, it can even affect their high school classes as well. If you score bad on one test, that could mean that you get put into a lower class for the next semester, which won't look good on college applications and also won't look well for you because you know you can do better than that. It's the law here in the United States that we have annual testing thanks to the 2000 Act that was created, the No Child Left Behind Act, but not all countries are actually like us. Some are stricter like China and some are more lenient like Finland. I chose to talk about Finland because Finland is one of the top-ranked countries in the entire world, and they only test their children once out of their entire school career, not including college, just from K to 12. They are ranked top in almost every single category, and they test their children once at the end of their high school career, which is similar to our SAT. All of this information was found according to Kristen Slacky in her Business Insider article that she wrote on standardized testing. She compared many different countries to each other, and Finland is just coming out on top on everything. They decided as a country that this was the best method for them, just like we decided that the teach-to-test method was the best method, but we need to update that. Everything needs updating, and we need to update the teach-to-test method. As for the United States, we decided that as a whole, the government would decide what each state did, what each county did, what each district did, when in reality, it should be all up to the state and local government. The federal government isn't coming to observe the classrooms. They're not seeing the children. They're not seeing the culture. They're not seeing the environment. All of that plays into a way a child learns, and that's why the state and local government need to be in charge of what we get for testing and if we get any at all. I just said standardized testing laws should be left in the hands of the local or state government. The federal government does not know what we go through in each individual state, so why would they be in charge of such matters? The local government can see how the test is tolerated in the individual school district, and they're able to reach out to the parents and create a discussion on what's working for their students and what's not. The teach-to-test method should be taken out of schools because children are learning to test. They're not learning how to store information. We're not allowing a diverse and inclusive community in our schools if we're only including one of the learning styles, not all 8. If they're tested through writing, speech, and hands-on experience, our children are more likely to be successful in their future lives. They're more likely to score better if the test incorporates their learning style, and they're more likely to just succeed in general and get into the college they want without all the stress. All learning styles need to be accepted, and we want our children to succeed. To leave you with one piece of information, in 2015, on average, 112 standardized tests were given to students per year. Is that really necessary? that testing eats up 20 to 25 hours of every school year, when they could be learning useful information for their future.